I watched my wife's coffin lower into the ground, while my own son stood beside it, stone-faced, pretending not to know me. 12 years ago, I went to prison for a crime she committed. Now she's dead, I've inherited her empire, and the truth she buried is clawing its way back to the surface. My name is Michael Carver, and this isn't a redemption story. It's a confession, a reckoning, a debt finally coming due. If you're watching this video, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you first heard about my revenge, because I need to know how far the story has traveled and how much of it you think is over. Trust me, it's not. The rain in Seattle hits my window like a steady drummer who forgot the rest of the band. It's been my metronome for 12 years, ever since headlines stripped my name down to 4 ugly letters, CFO. I used to track markets to the second. Now I track refunds for hairdressers, line cooks, janitors. Folks who pay in cash, tip in pie, and look you in the eye when they thank you. Honest work. Big on dignity, short on applause. It was late Friday. I'd just told a night shift nurse how to keep the IRS off her alimony, poured the last of my coffee, and let the quiet in. That's the thing I've learned over 62 American winters. Quiet never lies to you. It doesn't flatter or bargain. It sits there and asks if you can bear it. My phone buzzed across the desk like it wanted out. Chicago number. I don't pick up numbers I don't know. Not since the blogs taught me how creative the words thief and traitor can be. But something made me reach. Mr. Carver. Michael Carver. This is Gwen Adler & Cole. I'm calling about the estate of Eleanor Hart. Name hit me like cold water. Eleanor. The woman I once believed I could outrun the world for. The woman who built Heartline Systems from a storefront into a skyline, and who watched me take the perp walk for a crime that kept her dream alive. I'm sorry to inform you, Ms. Hart passed on Wednesday, Gwen said evenly. The service is tomorrow, 2 p.m. St. Bartholomew's, then the will reading at 4. Your presence is requested. Rain got louder. Or maybe my heartbeat did. 12 years ago, I left Chicago with a cardboard box and a prison buzz cut. My son Aaron wouldn't look at me at sentencing. He was 26, a rising star in product strategy, already keeping a spreadsheet on his life like it was a hostile takeover. He believed what his mother showed him, transfers memos, a confession signed by my hand and by my fear. He believed, and that belief slammed a steel door between us that no visiting hours could pry open. I stared at the wall, where the paint peeled into a shape that looks like Lake Michigan if you squint. I'll be there, I said. When I hung up, I waited for the part of me that used to calculate risk to explain what the hell I'd just done. It didn't. Just the rain and the radiator clanking like an old man clearing his throat before saying something that matters. I opened the closet and took out my navy suit. It's 10 years out of date, but honest about it like me. I ran a hand over the fabric and thought about the last time I saw Eleanor up close. Hospital. Lighting beeps, the smell of lemon cleaner. Aaron standing between us like a bailiff. You need to leave, he'd said, voice like a gavel. Eleanor kept her eyes on the window, where Chicago tried to look gentle and failed. At SeaTac the next morning, an agent glanced at my ID, then at my face as if making sure age hadn't stolen the man altogether. On the plane, a grandmother told me her grandson hit a double in Little League. I nodded, smiled when I was supposed to, and tried not to think of Aaron at 7, holding up a plastic trophy like he'd just won the country. Chicago from the air is a language of lines, streets, tracks, the hard edge of the lake. On the ground, the city's talk is wind and sirens, and that Midwestern promise that tomorrow could be better if you show up. I used to believe that promise was written for me. Then I learned some promises arrive stamped return to sender. I checked into a 2-star hotel that tried hard and didn't quite get there. Shower ran hot, which is all a man needs at my age. I ironed the suit, knotted the tie with fingers that remember how. My reflection in the TV screen looked like a man I'd trust with my taxes, but not my heart. St. Bartholomew's sits on a corner of old stone and new glass, like a handshake across decades. The service drew half of tech and a third of finance. I stayed in the back, where men like me stand when they are invited and not wanted. Aaron was at the front, black suit shoulders, squared the kind of jaw that cameras respect. Beside him, Victor Salazar, COO. The expression of a man who likes knowing where the bodies are buried because he chose the plots. Ministers talk about dust and mercy. Executives talk about legacy and vision. Neither word brings a person back. I watched the casket and tried to remember Eleanor's laugh before it learned how to negotiate. Once on a Sunday with cheap hamburgers and a broken fan, she'd tilted her head back and let joy own her face. You don't forget a thing like that. You just live long enough to wonder if you imagined it. When the service ended, I slipped out before condolences could turn into questions I didn't want to answer. Chicago air hit me like a verdict cold final, not interested in appeal. Adler & Cole's conference room was all chrome and view. You could see the lake smirking in the distance, like it knew our secrets and was bored of them. Around the table sat people who had known me as Mike, back when jokes landed and numbers did what I told them. Their eyes slid off me like I'd turned into a legal risk. Gwen Adler entered with a leather folder and a voice that understood how to land a plane in bad weather. "Thank you for coming," she said. "This won't be easy, but it will be clear." Aaron didn't look at me. I studied his hands, the same long fingers that used to wrap around my thumb when we crossed streets. Now they tapped a pen in a rhythm that said, "Impatience." He'd learned to wear power the way some men wear grief, tight necessary. Gwen began. "The last will and testament of Eleanor Marie Hart, executed June 5th of this year." She read the opening statement, and I braced for corporate poetry. What came was something else entirely. Words that didn't flinch. A woman emitting what the world never would have guessed, that in 2013, when Heartline was choking, she moved money from the pension plan to keep the machine running. Illegal. Wrong. Hers. I felt the room tilt, that slow ship roll when a storm has found you. Aaron's pen stopped. She writes, Gwen continued, that Michael Carver discovered the transfers, that he intended to report them, and that she begged him not to for the sake of their son. She states he agreed to take responsibility and accept prosecution. A sound left my throat that I didn't authorize. Not a sob. More like a hinge finally catching. Gwen turned a page. She asks that the truth be read aloud. She says she is not asking forgiveness. She is making an accounting. Then the bequests. Scholarships in Southside schools Eleanor never visited when we were married. A fund for women founders who didn't have a seat at the table. Good, thoughtful late. And then, the remainder of my estate, including all Heartline Systems voting shares, real property, and accounts, I leave to Michael Carver. Chairs scraped softly. Midwestern shock. Gwen kept reading. To my son, Aaron. I leave $25, $1 for each year of service, along with this message. Unearned money corrupts. Unlearned power destroys. Begin again. Silence did what it does when it's heavy enough, made cowards of us all. Eyes avoided eyes, except one pair, Victor's. He looked at me, like a man checks a fence line for weak spots. Aaron finally faced me. The boy who used to kick a soccer ball against our garage door until the paint chipped was gone. In his place, a man betrayed twice in an afternoon, first by death, then by truth. His face didn't crumple. It calcified. "This is a stunt," he said to no one and everyone. She was not in her right mind. Eleanor was evaluated by 3 physicians prior to execution, Gwen replied. Capacity was affirmed in writing. Aaron's jaw worked like he wanted to chew the moment into something he could swallow. He stood, then sat again, then found his voice. He confessed, he said, pointing in my direction without looking. He signed. I signed to keep you whole, I said softly. It felt like throwing a rope across a canyon and realizing you should have measured first. For a second, just one, something like the old boy, flickered in his eyes. Then Victor leaned close, whispered something that took the oxygen out of the room, and the flicker died. Gwen slid a small sealed envelope across the table. My name, in Eleanor's hard, elegant cursive. She asked that you read this privately, Mr. Carver. I didn't touch it. My hands weren't shaking. They were thinking. Around us the lake went on, being a lake. The city went on being a city. The world, impolite as ever, went on. But in that chrome box, in the sky, a life I had learned to live without, blinked and came back on the grid. Victor stood, smoothed his tie, and gave me a smile that meant trouble. Congratulations, Mr. Carver, he said. Owning a company is harder than ruining one. He walked out with Aaron at his side. I reached for the envelope. The paper was heavier than it looked. So are most truths, if you wait long enough to tell them. I broke the seal. They say funerals are for the living, but looking around that chapel, I wasn't so sure. It felt like a board meeting dressed in bike. Every tech executive in Chicago seemed to have shown up, the venture capital sharks who'd once begged Eleanor for a seat at her table, the journalists who'd built their careers on her legend, and the competitors who came to confirm she was really gone. The air smelled like lilies and expensive regret. At the front of the aisle stood Aaron, my son, if that word still applied. He didn't look at me once. He stood beside a pair of lawyers and Victor Salazar Hartline's COO. The same Victor who used to come over for Thanksgiving, talking IPO strategy while carving turkey. Now he wore a sleek black coat and an expression that could freeze gasoline. Eleanor's portrait sat on an easel beside the casket, the PR-approved version of her perfect hair, perfect teeth, eyes that promised you a future and took it from you in the same breath. I remembered her differently. Laughing barefoot in our first apartment, eating Chinese takeout off a stack of balance sheets, talking about changing the world before the world changed us. When the minister spoke of vision and legacy, I found myself wondering if God ever audited people like us, if he balanced the books before letting us in. After the service, nobody approached me. They saw me, the fallen CFO, the man who embezzled millions, but they pretended they didn't. Invisible is a kind of mercy. By 4:03, we'd all migrated to Adler & Cole, 28th floor. The conference room looked out over the Chicago River, steel and glass glittering, like it knew what money could do to people. The air conditioning hummed. The city below moved on, unaware a decade-old secret was about to break open. Gwen Adler stood at the head of the table, professional calm, wrapped around a spine of steel. Thank you for coming. Mrs. Hart's last will and testament will be read in full, as per her explicit instruction. There will be no summaries, no omissions. Aaron sat across from her, posture perfect, eyes dead. I took a chair near the window. I'd learned my place a long time ago, off to the side, out of the picture. Gwen began reading, her voice clear, almost kind. To those gathered, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. I have lived my life under the illusion that success excused silence. I was wrong. The room stilled. Even Victor leaned forward. In 2013, facing collapse, I authorized the temporary reallocation of funds from the Employee Pension Trust to maintain liquidity. I told myself it was survival. It was fraud. My pulse slowed. I'd spent 12 years waiting to hear those words from her. Now that they came, I didn't know what to do with them. Gwen continued, My husband Michael Carver discovered the transfers during a routine audit. He confronted me. He was right to. I begged him not to report it for our son's sake, for the company's sake. He offered me something no one else ever did, offered sacrifice. He took the blame, went to prison, and let me keep my ember intact. I told myself it was for Aaron, that his future was worth one man's ruin. But that man was better than I ever deserved. A whisper rippled through the room. Aaron's pen stopped tapping. His eyes darted toward Gwen, then to me, as if waiting for me to deny it, to laugh it off. I didn't move. She kept reading, Michael Carver is innocent of every charge brought against him. His only crime was loving his family more than himself. Gwen paused, let the words hang there like the smoke after an explosion. Aaron's face went pale. I saw confusion first, then anger, the kind that comes when your entire world gets redrafted mid-sentence. Gwen turned to the final section. To my son, Aaron Hart Carver, I leave $25 for each year he served the company. With this message, money you didn't earn corrupts. Leadership you didn't learn destroys. Begin again. The silence afterward was absolute. I could hear the faint hum of the HVAC system, the creak of my own breath. Gwen turned one last page. The remainder of my estate, including all assets, holdings, and intellectual property associated with Heartline Systems, valued at approximately $190 million, I leave to my former husband, Michael Carver, the only truly honest man I ever knew. There it was. A fortune I didn't want, a vindication I didn't need, and a ghost I couldn't forgive. Chairs scraped. Murmurs filled the room, disbelief, jealousy, moral arithmetic. I stayed seated, watching the city blur through the window. Aaron stood abruptly. No, he said. This is a fabrication. She wasn't of sound mind. Gwen adjusted her glasses. Mrs. Hart was evaluated by 3 independent physicians prior to signing. All certified full capacity. Aaron slammed his hand against the table. He confessed, there are court records. Records of a plea bargain. Gwen said calmly, entered to protect you and the company. Which your mother confirms here. Bullshit. The word came out raw, not boardroom polished. She's not here to defend that story. And he pointed at me, shaking. He's playing the victim. I met his eyes. For the first time in 12 years, he actually looked at me. All that hate, all that confusion, searching for somewhere to land. I'm not playing anything, Aaron, I said quietly. I already lost the game. Victor leaned close to Aaron, whispering something low and fast. Aaron's jaw clenched. His lawyer, a slick man in a gray suit, stood up. For the record, the lawyer said, we will be filing an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order to prevent the transfer of any shares or assets until the court can review the matter. We believe undue influence may have occurred. Gwen nodded, unshaken. You're free to file. The estate has nothing to hide. I looked at Victor. He wasn't looking at me like a rival. He was looking at me like a problem. The kind of problem that disappears in the night. Outside, the Chicago rain had started again, streaking the glass like a countdown. Inside, I could feel the temperature drop, not from the air conditioner, but from the realization that truth once set loose doesn't heal. It burns. Gwen closed the folder gently. Mr. Carver, Pacifica's Hart also left a sealed drive for you and instructions that you read her private letter before deciding the future of Heartline Systems. Victor's mouth twitched, a flicker of something too quick to name. I took the envelope and the flash drive, both marked in Eleanor's familiar, meticulous handwriting. Anything else? Aaron asked, his voice trembling between fury and heartbreak. Gwen hesitated. Only her last line. She read it softly. Tell Michael I finally learned the difference between success and peace. And tell Aaron that someday he will too. Aaron turned away, shoulders stiff, as if one more word might shatter him. Victor put a hand on his back and steered him toward the door. I watched them leave the son who'd disowned me and the man who'd replaced me. The rain outside the window grew heavier, streaking the skyline into ghosts. I slipped the letter into my coat pocket. Truth, wealth, and vengeance, none of it mattered as much as the look on my boy's face when the story he'd built his life on began to crumble. As Victor reached the doorway, he looked back at me. That smile again, small, sharp, promising trouble. "Congratulations, Mr. Carver," he said. "Let's see how long you can keep what isn't really yours." And then he was gone, taking my son, and the last piece of quiet with him. Back in the hotel, the rain kept doing what rain does based in Chicago, telling the truth no one asked for. I set the envelope on the nightstand and just looked at it for a while. Eleanor's handwriting, sharp, deliberate, the same loops and slashes that used to show up on Post-its, stuck to our refrigerator. "Pick up milk. Don't forget Aaron's recital. We'll fix this." We never did. I broke the seal. The paper smelled faintly of cedar, and her perfume something expensive and controlled. Her words were not controlled. "Michael, if you're reading this, I'm finally out of excuses. Dying makes honesty easier. You always said truth is just math we refuse to solve. You were right." She went on to confess she'd known about her illness for over a year, that she'd tried to manage her exit like she managed a merger. Typical Eleanor, turning mortality into a spreadsheet. "You once told me that Heartline was born from integrity, that if we ever lost that, we'd lose everything. I did lose it, and you paid the bill. I can't undo what I took from you, the years, the Nam, the daughter's trust. What I can give you is the truth. I read every word. Twice. Inside the attached drive are full records, emails, wire transfers, memos, proof of what I did. But there's more, Michael. Someone else was in those shadows with me. Someone who made sure I stayed quiet, who profited when you went down. You'll see it when you open the files." I stopped there, because for the first time since the will reading, I felt something new creeping in, a chill that had nothing to do with age. Eleanor had always been willing to take a hit to protect her ember. But this sounded like something else, fear. Real shaking fear. "Don't sell Heartline. Don't hand it to Aaron until he's ready. I know you think you're done with saving people, but this time it isn't about saving us. It's about saving what's left of a decency. Keep the company alive. Keep it clean. Build it into what we said it would be, before ambition rotted it out. Please. Eleanor." I folded the letter back into the envelope. My hands weren't steady. Not from sadness, grief I could handle, but from the sense that the dead woman had just handed me a live grenade wrapped in nostalgia. The flash drive sat beside the hotel lamp, black metal, unmarked. I plugged it into my laptop. The screen blinked once, twice, then filled with folders. 2013 audits, trust transfers, Marina Victor. My pulse picked up. Before I could open one, a password prompt appeared. Then another window, white text on a black background. Access denied. File encryption locked. I tried again. Same message. Then a new one. Remote override detected. Someone somewhere was inside this drive right now, erasing her confession. I yanked the USB out like it was burning me. My laptop screen glitched, static lines flickering, then a blue flash before rebooting. When the desktop reappeared, the only sign left of the intrusion was an empty folder labeled EH Legacy blank. I sat there in the dim light, heart thudding, slow and deliberate, like the countdown of something that had just begun. There were only two people who could have known about that drive, Eleanor, and whoever she was afraid of. I poured myself a cup of stale coffee and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Grace Mullins, attorney at law, my old corporate counsel from before the fall. She'd left Heartline long before the scandal, hung her own shingle defending whistleblowers. Smart, relentless, allergic to bullshit. She answered on the third ring. Carver, Jesus. I thought you were dead. Still trying, I said. I need a favor. Off the books. Is this about the will? I read the headlines. Hell of a twist. Grace, someone's tampering with Eleanor's files. She left me evidence. Real evidence. But it's disappearing. Silence on the line. Then the sound of a lighter flicking. Where are you? Hotel on Walker. Room 412. I'll be there in an hour. Don't touch that drive again. When the call ended, I looked out at the river. The city lights reflected off the water, like broken promises, and for the first time since stepping foot back here, I realized this wasn't about inheritance anymore. Eleanor had been protecting something, or someone, and if she'd died scared, then whatever she'd started might still be alive. I picked up the flash drive, turned it over once in my palm, and set it down beside the cold coffee. It blinked red. Once, then twice, then went dark. The courthouse on South Dearborn still smelled like polished wood and stale ambition. 12 years ago, I'd stood here as a defendant, waiting for a sentence to erase half my life. Now I was back in a suit that didn't quite fit, sitting behind a table marked Respondent, listening to my son's lawyers explain why I was a danger to corporate stability. Funny how words can loop back around on you. Aaron sat 3 chairs away, jaw locked, a vein twitching just under his left temple. He wouldn't look at me, but his silence screamed across the aisle louder than any testimony. Beside him, Victor Salazar leaned forward, whispering to their attorney, a man who looked like he'd been grown in a petri dish marked litigation. Judge Ramirez, a woman in her late 50s, with a face carved from granite, called the court to order. We're here on Hart v. Carver, an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order, preventing transfer of assets per the late Eleanor Hart's will. Counsel, proceed. Aaron's lawyer stood all cufflinks and certainty. Your Honor, we have reason to believe Mrs. Hart was under undue influence when executing this will. The abrupt reversal of inheritance, disinheriting her only child, and awarding everything to an ex-spouse previously convicted of embezzlement, defies rational behavior. He made ex-spouse sound like parasite. Judge Ramirez raised an eyebrow. And you have evidence of coercion. We have circumstantial indications, he said, hedging already. Medical notes, suggesting cognitive decline. Gwen Adler rose before he could finish. Objection. The decedent's attending physicians filed sworn affidavits attesting full mental capacity. We've entered them into record. The judge nodded, flipping through her file. I see them. 3 independent assessments, all consistent. Aaron's lawyer pressed on. We still believe the will's contents reflect manipulation. Mr. Carver has a clear financial motive. I stood before Gwen could stop me. With respect, Your Honor, my financial motives died in a courtroom 12 years ago. All I've wanted since is to be left alone and to keep what's left of my integrity intact. Ramirez looked over her glasses at me. Mr. Carver, you're not required to testify today. I know, I said. But if this is about motive, mine's simple. I didn't ask for this. But I won't let Heartline become a carcass for scavengers. Victor smiled without showing teeth. Gwen placed a calming hand on my arm. Your Honor, the estate intends to maintain all business operations. To ensure stability, Mr. Carver has already retained interim leadership. The judge tilted her head. Go on. Gwen gestured to the woman seated quietly behind us, a tall, silver-haired executive in a plain navy dress. Nora Whitfield, former CFO of Lexington Biotech, 30 years experience, no prior connection to Heartline. She's accepted appointment as interim CEO pending board confirmation. Nora stood, nodded respectfully. Heartline's infrastructure is sound, Your Honor. What it lacks is transparency. Mr. Carver intends to implement a full compliance overhaul, independent quarterly audits, an external ethics board, and an anonymous whistleblower hotline reporting directly to the chair. Ramirez studied her, then me. That true, Mr. Carver? Yes, ma'am. I've spent enough time watching systems rot from the inside. If I'm going to hold the keys, I want the place to pass inspection. A murmur spread through the gallery, half approval, half disbelief. Aaron leaned toward Victor, whispering furiously. I caught just enough to hear, he's turning this into a morality play. The judge rapped her gavel once. I'm not here to mediate family therapy, she said. I'm here to determine whether a legal basis exists for a TRO. She paused, scanning her notes. Then, with that flat Midwestern tone that made bad news sound like the weather motion denied. The estate stands as executed. No restraining order. The words hit like a bell ringing in the back of my skull. Around us, reporters scribbled. Aaron froze. Victor's jaw flexed once, then relaxed into a politician's grin. But Ramirez wasn't finished. However, she added, the court does note some inconsistencies in financial filings submitted during Mrs. Hart's final year. I'm forwarding those to the state attorney's office for review. Possible criminal irregularities, likely not connected to the will itself, but perhaps to Hartline's prior operations. That pulled the oxygen out of the room. Victor shifted in his seat, eyes darting to Aaron, then quickly down to his phone. Ramirez's gavel struck once more. Court adjourned. The room dissolved into movement, lawyers collecting papers, reporters whispering into recorders, flashbulbs flicking like angry lightning. I stayed where I was, staring at the polished wood of the table, feeling a strange mix of triumph and dread. For the first time in 12 years, the law hadn't buried me. It had, however, just pointed its flashlight into Hartline's basement. Victor brushed past me on his way out, phone to his ear. His voice dropped to a growl I could still hear. Yeah. It's time. He's moving faster than I thought. Grace, who'd slipped into the back row unnoticed, caught my eye. That sound like a man planning compliance training to you, she murmured. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. That sounded like a man making a call you don't want traced. The diner sat on the corner of Halsted and Monroe, a relic from when coffee was a dime, and nobody had heard of Wi-Fi. The kind of place where the waitress calls you hon and fills your cup before you ask. I'd chosen it on purpose, neutral ground. No boardrooms, no security badges, just two men and a Formica table that had seen better presidents. Aaron was already there when I walked in. He looked like every version of success money could buy. Tailored coat, smartwatch, posture, straight enough to hold a flag. But there was something brittle in his eyes. Something the cameras never caught. He didn't stand when I approached, just nodded toward the seat across from him. Still, like your coffee black? He asked without looking up. Old habits, I said, sliding in. You double espresso. Less compromise that way. He smiled when he said it, but it wasn't a smile. It was armor. The waitress poured for me. Hesitated by him. He gave a polite nod that made her blush and leave fast. He'd learned that trick from Eleanor, how to turn courtesy into distance. For a minute, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the sizzle from the kitchen and a Hank Williams song leaking from the jukebox, like nostalgia that refused to die. Finally, Aaron broke the silence. You enjoying your victory lap? I looked at him. If this is a victory, son, it's the loneliest one I've ever seen. He let out a short, sharp laugh. You really don't see it, do you? You let her destroy everything I built. My credibility. My reputation. You sat down there and said nothing while she humiliated me in front of the entire board. She told the truth. She told her truth, he snapped. She was dying and wanted a clean conscience. Great. But now I'm the villain in her redemption story. And you get to walk out the hero. I let him talk. Sometimes you have to let a man empty the poison before he can breathe again. You think I wanted this? I said quietly. I didn't even want the company. Then give it to me. Not yet. His eyes narrowed. You think I'm not ready? I think your mother was right. You still need to learn what power costs before you earn the right to hold it. He leaned forward, voice low. You think working a few tax returns and living in some rainy shoebox in Seattle makes you enlightened. You think that buys you moral authority. I sipped my coffee. It tasted like burnt pennies and memory. No, I said. It buys perspective. He stared at me, then laughed again, softer this time. Perspective. That's rich. I'm offering you something, I said. A job. That stopped him. What entry-level compliance associate? Minimum wage. No titles. No perks. No parking spot with your name on it. You'd report to a woman half your age and answer phones before you file anything. His mouth fell open. You're kidding. I'm not. It's the same offer I'd make to anyone who wants to rebuild from the ground up. You want Heartline, earn it. He shook his head, incredulous. You want me to scrub floors in a company I used to run? No. I want you to understand why those floors matter. The words hung between us, heavy and stupid and true. He looked down at his untouched espresso, then back at me. You really don't want revenge, do you? I've had enough of revenge. It keeps bad company. Then why this? He asked. Why make me crawl? Because crawling's how you learn to walk again. He went quiet then, and for a long time, neither of us said anything. Rain started tapping the diner window, the same rhythm it always finds me with. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its edge. She said something about me and the will, didn't she? Something beyond the $25. I nodded slowly. She said money you didn't earn corrupts. Leadership you didn't learn destroys. He flinched like I'd hit him. For a second, the CEO mask cracked, and I saw my boy, the one who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares, who believed I could fix anything with a hug and a flashlight. She really wrote that, he asked, voice barely above a whisper. She did. He leaned back, blinking hard, like trying to hide the tremor in his jaw. Then maybe she was right, he murmured half to himself. But I'm not her project anymore. Or yours. He stood, dropping a few bills on the table for a coffee. Neither of us finished. I'm not taking your pity job, he said, gripping the back of the chair. Not now. Maybe not ever. All right, I said. But the offer doesn't expire. He hesitated, then turned toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped, hand on the frame. Without looking back, he said, if she wanted me to start over, she should have told me that while she was still breathing. And then he was gone out into the gray drizzle, swallowed by the city she'd built and I'd lost. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair across from me, the coffee gone cold. When the waitress came to clear the cups, she said softly, You okay, hon? I nodded. Not yet, I said. But maybe. Outside, I caught a reflection in the window. My son, halfway down the block, stopped at the corner. For a second, he turned like he wanted to come back. Then the light changed and he crossed the street. 2 nights after that diner conversation, sleep hadn't made a reappearance in my life. I sat in the temporary office Heartline had given me, a glass box, 26 floors up, too clean for a man who preferred coffee rings on wood. Nora Whitfield had been moving fast, building systems, reorganizing teams, auditing accounts. And me, I was still staring at a locked drive and a ghost's handwriting. That's when the email came. No subject line, no sender name. Just one word in the from field sparrow. Mr. Carver, you don't know me, but I used to work in Heartline's pension compliance team before the 2013 restructuring. I saw things I couldn't prove back then. Your wife wasn't the only one moving money. She was covering someone else's tracks. The ERI safety funds were temporarily transferred into a private equity group named MK Capital Partners, Marina Kroll's firm. There was a consulting fee looped back to personal accounts linked to Victor Salazar. Check the archived server logs. Folder path. Legacy Trust 2013 Q4. You have enemies in the building. Don't trust internal IT Siro. I read it 3 times, then looked out over the city, the lake shimmering under a bruised sky. The pieces started clicking into place, the missing folders. On Eleanor's drive, the fear in her last letter, the someone else she'd mentioned. Victor and Marina. 2 names that had danced around our dinner table's partners. In every sense, except legally. He'd handled operations. She handled the numbers behind the numbers. I called Grace. She arrived 20 minutes later, trench coat, damp hair tied back, eyes already sharp. You look like you saw a ghost, she said, tossing her umbrella in the corner. I think I just got an email from one, I said, handing her my laptop. She scanned the message, whistled low. Sparrow. Huh? Cute code name for someone about to get their wings clipped. You sure it's legit? I cross-checked MK Capital. Marina's firm handled a restructuring fund in 2013. The same year Eleanor moved pension money. Of course she did, Grace muttered. Marina was on every ethics panel in town. The perfect face for laundering fear. She looked at me. You still have that drive? I pulled it from the locked drawer. It's fried. But maybe not beyond help. Grace called in a favor, some tech kid she trusted, former forensic analyst, now freelancing for whistleblower cases. His name was Javier Cruz. 35, hoodie, nervous energy, smelled faintly of energy drinks and rebellion. He set up at my desk, booting a secure terminal. Okay, he said, we'll isolate it from the network. If somebody's been remotely wiping files, I can ghost trap the deletion logs. Speak English, Grace said. Means I can see who's trying to erase what. He plugged in the drive. The laptop hummed, fans spinning. Lines of code rolled across the screen like a slot machine from hell. Got something, Javier muttered. Email chains between Victor and someone tagged MK Advisor. Yeah, that's Marina. Talking about shifting pension liabilities into a temporary offshore escrow. Holy hell, this is dirty. He leaned closer, squinting. Wait, there's a video file encrypted but partly intact. Timestamp 2014. Want me to open it? I nodded. Static first. Then Eleanor's voice, faint but clear. Victor, this isn't what we agreed. This will sink us. Relax, a man's voice replied. No one's going to trace a Cayman account back to Heartline. You just sign the disclosure. I'll handle the optics. And Michael, she asked. Michael's gone. He took the fall. Let him stay gone. The audio cut out. Javier swore softly. Grace exhaled. That's your smoking gun. Yeah, I said. And if Sparrow's right, it's just the first chamber. Before we could copy anything, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then black. The building went silent, except for the faint whine of Javier's external hard drive. Backup power should have kicked in, he said. This doesn't make sense. From the hallway came the sound of footsteps, fast and deliberate. Someone shouted about a localized outage. The floor-to-ceiling windows glowed faintly with the reflection of emergency lights from the street below. Grace's phone vibrated. She looked at the screen, frowned. It's Nora. She says half the data center just went dark. Servers tripped offline simultaneously. Ite thinks it's sabotage. Javier typed furiously, trying to save what he could. They're purging the system logs, he said. Somebody's running a remote kill script. Can you stop it? I asked. He shook his head. Already gone. there wiping everything that points to those pension transfers. And then the drive in his hand blinked once, red, then died. In the darkness, I could see our reflections in the window, 3 silhouettes framed against the skyline. One old man, one lawyer, one hacker. And behind us, the ghosts of every secret Eleanor had tried to expose. Grace whispered, "They're cleaning house." I nodded, feeling that same old weight crawl back into my chest, the one I thought I'd left in a prison cell. Because somewhere beneath this city, someone had just pulled Heartline's plug, and the truth was going dark with it. The storm came in off the lake that night, hard and electric, the kind that makes the city feel alive and dangerous again. Grace had begged me not to go. "Let Nora handle it," she'd said, but I couldn't sit still. Too many ghosts already whispering in my head. Too many memories of signing things I should have burned. So I drove out to the data center myself, the one Heartline leased in an old converted warehouse on the south side. Midnight, rain slashing across the windshield, like it wanted to stop me. When I pulled up, the place looked dead. No security lights, no hum from the backup generators. Only a single bulb flickering above the loading dock, throwing sickly yellow light across the wet concrete. A guard stepped out from the shadows. Not one of ours. He was young, built like a wall raincoat, too newsstands, too professional. "Evening," I said, flashing my Heartline badge. "Michael Carver, company chair. We had a system outage tonight. I need to inspect the servers." He barely glanced at the badge. "No access authorized after 10 p.m., sir. You'll need to come back in the morning." "Yeah," I said. "And by morning, everything worth finding will be gone." I took a step forward. He stepped into my path, hand on his holster. Not standard issue security. Wrong weapon, wrong eyes. "Whose contract are you on?" I asked. He smiled, small and cold. "Out of your pay grade, old man." That did it. Something in me snapped. Maybe pride, maybe exhaustion, and I shoved past him. He caught my arm hard. My shoulders screamed in protest. "Back off," I said. "I built this damn system. You don't get to keep me out of it." He twisted, trying to push me back. My elbow connected with his chest, and for a moment, I almost felt young again, until the sharp pressure hit behind my sternum. A white flash of pain. The world narrowed to rain and heartbeat. The guard froze, uncertain. "Hey, you okay?" I dropped to one knee, breath short, chest tight. "Yeah," I rasped. "Fine, just give me a second." Then I heard another voice from the gate. Step away from him. "Aaron." He was running through the raincoat, open tie, gone face pale, in the flashing lights of an approaching cruiser. The guard backed off, one hand up. He forced entry. "He's my father," Aaron snapped, "and if you lay a hand on him again, I'll have you arrested myself." He was beside me in seconds, slipping an arm under mine. "Dad, you're having an episode. We need an ambulance." "It's not," I tried to say, but the rest came out as a cough. He ignored me, pulling out his phone. 911, cardiac symptoms, South Halstead data facility now. Rain drummed against the asphalt like a heartbeat in surround sound. I leaned on him, and for the first time in years, he didn't flinch from my weight. By the time the paramedics arrived, I was sitting on a concrete barrier, breathing slow, counting each inhale like a gift. They hooked me up, checked vitals, said it looked like a mild episode angina. The medic called it stress-induced. No surprise there. Aaron stayed the whole time, soaked to the bone. He didn't say much, just watched the flashing lights reflect off puddles, jaw clenched. When the medics cleared me to go, he finally spoke. "You shouldn't have come here alone." "I couldn't let them erase her twice," I said. He looked at me, rainwater running down his face, like tears he wouldn't admit to. "You still think this is about Mom?" "It always was." Before I could say more, one of the paramedics pointed to the side door. "Sir, your security camera caught something interesting." We followed him into the small monitoring booth. The footage was grainy, colorless, but clear enough. At 11:42 p.m., a figure in a dark raincoat entered the restricted bay. Hat low, walk fast. But when the person turned toward the camera, even half blurred, I knew that jawline. Victor Salazar. Aaron saw it too. Jesus Christ. "He's cleaning up," I said quietly, "deleting what's left before the subpoenas start." Aaron exhaled through his teeth, realization dawning. "You're going to report this, aren't you? I don't have a choice." The next morning, my hands still trembling from the night before, sat in Grace's office as she slid a stack of federal forms toward me. Complaint under the Securities and Exchange Commission, and a referral for the Department of Labor's ERISA division. "This is the big one," she said softly. "Once you sign, it's public. You're officially accusing Heartline's former COO and financial partners of pension fraud. There's no going back." I picked up the pen. My chest still hurt, but my conscience didn't. "I've already lost 12 years to silence," I said. "Let's see what truth costs." I signed both pages. Outside, thunder rolled again, deep and distant, like the sound of something enormous waking up beneath the city. Aaron stood by the window, watching the rain, arms crossed. "You just opened a hive of angry bees, Dad." "Yeah," I said, leaning back in the chair. "But sometimes you've got to lift the lid if you ever want to find the honey." Behind him, a flash of lightning illuminated the skyline's steel wet glass, and for just a second, a shadow on the next rooftop that looked a lot like Victor watching from afar. It surprised everyone, maybe even himself, when Aaron showed up Monday morning at Heartline, wearing jeans and a plain gray shirt instead of one of his tailored suits. No entourage, no driver, no per team. Just a cardboard box with a coffee mug, a notepad, and a look that told the building he was there for something he couldn't name yet. He walked straight past the top floors, the ones he used to command, and took the elevator down to level 3 compliance, the same floor where the interns and paper pushers lived. Grace had arranged it quietly through Nora. Administrative compliance associate, his badge read. Minimum wage, no office, just a shared desk near the vending machine. When I saw him that morning, he looked at me like a soldier reporting for punishment. "You said the offer didn't expire," he said. "I'm here to collect." I nodded. "Then let's get to work." For weeks he buried himself in the small stuff: expense reports, timesheets, anonymous complaints from warehouse techs. The kind of details he'd never noticed when he wore a $5,000 watch. He learned that real leadership doesn't start with headlines. It starts with listening. Listening to Kim, a single mom in logistics who worked overtime every week but lost pay because of a broken tracking system. Listening to Carl, a forklift operator who'd filed 3 safety reports that disappeared somewhere up the chain. Aaron started connecting dots the way he used to connect code. Within a month, he found that one faulty scheduling algorithm was cheating hourly workers out of nearly 700 collective hours a week, unintentional on paper, but convenient for profit margins. He wrote a memo to Nora, recommending a fix. 2 days later, the change went live. For the first time since I'd seen him behind that funeral podium, Aaron smiled, a small, quiet thing, but real. And then came the big test. A Thursday afternoon board meeting, the first since my complaint to the SEC went public. The press had been circling like vultures, and Victor's name had started appearing in subpoenas. Marina Kroll's fund, MK Capital, had gone silent. Heartline needed a new contract to prove it wasn't dying. Nora presented it, a lucrative AI partnership with an overseas surveillance firm. The numbers were enormous enough to triple revenue by Q2. Aaron sat in the back, technically there only as staff. But as the presentation went on, I saw him shifting in his chair, jaw tightening. Finally, when Nora asked for comments, he raised a hand. Everyone turned. It was the first time he'd spoken in a boardroom since his mother's will. "I've reviewed the contract," he said. Clause 7. Gives them full data rights over our recognition software. You know what that means, right? They can use it to track civilians. Opponents. Journalists. One of the investors shrugged. "That's not our jurisdiction. It's our tech," Aaron shot back. "And our reputation. You sign that deal, and Heartline becomes a surveillance company. That's not who we are, at least not who we should be." The room went still. I watched him standing there, my son voice steady, spine straight, choosing integrity over opportunity. Nora looked at me. I gave a small nod. She closed the folder. Motioned to table the deal pending ethical review. There were groans but no objections. Afterward in the hallway, I found Aaron by the elevators. "You did the right thing," I said. He looked surprised. "Yeah, maybe. But it's not going to make me any friends." "Good," I said. "Friends are overrated in rooms like that. Conscience isn't." He actually laughed. "You always were better at speeches than business." "Not true," I said. "Business just got louder." That evening, as the office lights dimmed, Aaron stayed late finishing reports. The floor was nearly empty when he heard footsteps behind him, heels sharp and deliberate. He turned. Marina Kroll. Elegant, ageless eyes like polished steel. She wore a tailored white coat, the kind that looked more like armor than fabric. "Well," she said, smiling faintly. "The prodigal son returns. I was wondering when you'd stop hiding behind your father's halo." Aaron straightened. "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted, Heartline. And I think you want it too." He didn't answer, but she stepped closer, voice soft. "You think Michael's going to keep that chair forever? He's tired, sentimental. He'll hand it over eventually, maybe to you, if you play it right. I can make that happen." He frowned. "You mean if I help you?" Marina smiled wider. "You're quick. Help me fix the optics. Convince your father to withdraw his complaint. We bring the company private, restructure to erase the scandal. You get the title you deserve. CEO." The air restored. Aaron stared at her for a long moment, searching for the angle. "And what's in it for you?" She tilted her head, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Redemption," she said. "And 10% equity." He almost laughed but didn't. "You should go, Marina. Think about it," she said, leaning in. "Your mother protected the company. Your father's about to bury it. The question is, which legacy do you want to live under?" She walked away, heels clicking on the marble until the sound faded down the corridor. Aaron stood alone in the half-light, her words echoing like a riddle he couldn't shake. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that once signed million-dollar contracts, and whispered to himself, "Which legacy indeed?" The headlines hit like thunder the following spring. SEC charges Heartline executives in pension fraud scheme. Salazar Kroll indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud, money laundering. Heartline Systems cooperates in federal inquiry. For a company that once lived on sleek branding and perfect optics, Heartline suddenly looked human again, flawed, exposed, and bleeding under fluorescent lights. The investigation took months, dragging every ghost into daylight. The recordings Javier recovered, the erased logs, Sparrow's emails, they all became evidence. Victor tried to disappear to Costa Rica. The FB brought him back in handcuffs. Marina's lawyers fought harder, claiming ignorance, but the wire transfers didn't lie. Through it all, I sat in conference rooms that smelled of stale coffee and fire, letting Grace do most of the talking. The government wasn't interested in destroying Heartline. They wanted compliance, restitution, and a public example. In the end, the Justice Department offered what they call a deferred prosecution agreement, a deal that saves a company if it's willing to clean house. Heartline would plead to no charges if it agreed to 3 conditions: full cooperation with federal investigators, restitution of all employee pension funds with interest, the creation of a public initiative called the Second Chance Fund, a scholarship and employment program for people re-entering society after incarceration. When the attorney read that last part aloud, I looked down at my hands, remembering my own release day. 12 years ago, no job, no savings, no dignity left. This wasn't just penance. It was symmetry. Grace smiled at me after the hearing. "You did it, Mike," she said. "You turned a confession into a legacy." "Eleanor did," I replied. "I just cleaned up the math." The media called it unprecedented. The board called it survival. The employees called it hope. For the first time, Heartline stood for something that wasn't profit margins or stock prices. The fund launched quietly that summer. The first recipients were former convicts from Chicago's South Side, enrolled in tech certification courses, some hired directly into our compliance team. Watching them walk through the doors, the same doors I once walked out of in shame, felt like closing a circle I hadn't realized was still open. I made one more decision that morning. I stepped down from day-to-day operations. Nora would continue as CEO. Aaron, now the face of the Second Chance Initiative, would stay in compliance for 1 more year. The press called it humility. I called it distance, the good kind, the kind that lets you see the horizon again. But I didn't leave entirely. I kept the title of chairman unpaid, symbolic. A man can walk away from power, but not from responsibility. At the board's final quarterly meeting, I laid down what I called the 12-month code. 12 simple but brutal standards for leadership. Every executive decision audited independently. Every contract reviewed for social impact. Every employee, top to bottom, trained in ethical reporting. No bonuses without compliance certification. And at the end of 12 months, every department graded not on revenue, but integrity. If Heartline passed, I'd transfer controlling ownership. If it didn't, I'd dissolve the company myself and donate every cent to the fund. Aaron listened from the far end of the table. He didn't interrupt, didn't argue, just nodded slowly. I saw the weight of it land on his shoulders, not as punishment, but inheritance. After the meeting, he caught me in the hallway. "You really mean it?" he asked. "You'd give it all away if we fail?" "I've already had everything taken once," I said. "It's easier when you choose it." He looked at me, trying to read between the lines, then smiled small, like the first flicker of a lighter in the dark. "I'll make it right," he said. "You'll see." "I hope so," I told him. "Because that's the test." Outside, Chicago was thawing into spring. The streets wet, the air smelling of rain and redemption. And somewhere across town, in a holding cell or a lawyer's office, Victor and Marina were watching the empire they'd built on deceit collapse, brick by brick. But I didn't feel triumphant. Just tired, and maybe for the first time in decades, clean. 12 months. That's what I'd given Aaron. 12 months to prove that the Carver name could mean something other than scandal. Grace asked me later that night, "What if he fails?" I looked out the window, watching lightning far out over the lake. "Then he'll learn the same lesson his mother did," I said. "That the truth doesn't wait forever." I didn't know yet if Aaron would pass the test. But for the first time in years, I believed he wanted to. I went home. Seattle welcomed me the way it always did, with rain tapping the window, like an old friend checking in. My 1-bedroom apartment hadn't changed. The same creaking radiator, the same chipped mug, the same steady rhythm of ordinary life. After everything that had burned and broken in Chicago, that cliche felt holy. I'd been rich, disgraced, powerful, forgotten. Now I was just a man making his own coffee again. And it was enough. The days settled into a rhythm, small accounting clients, Morning walks by the sound, the smell of salt and wet cedar. Some nights I still dreamed of courtrooms and sirens, of Eleanor's voice reading her confession. But when I woke, it wasn't guilt I felt anymore. It was gratitude. I'd survived my own story. 12 months passed faster than I expected. The 12-month code had become something real. Heartline's employees called it the compass. The press stopped treating the company like a scandal and started calling it a model of corporate integrity. Nora kept it steady, and Aaron learned. He stayed in that low-level compliance job longer than anyone thought he would. No titles, no shortcuts huts. He listened, fixed what he could, and when he didn't know something, he asked. That alone told me more than any quarterly report ever could. Then one gray morning, my phone buzzed. Chicago area code. A text from Erin. She built empires, then learned to build a self. A photo followed, a small granite headstone. Eleanor's grave. Beneath her name and the years were those words carved clean into the stone. He'd chosen the inscription himself. 2 days later, I was on a plane east again. I told my clients I'd be gone a week. Mrs. Chen handed me cookies for the flight, like I was going off to war. At Mount Hope Cemetery, the city felt smaller. The air was cool, the lake wind sharp. Eleanor's grave sat beneath a maple tree just starting to leaf. I knelt, brushed rainwater off the stone, and whispered, "You finally built something that lasts." When I stood, Aaron was there, hands in his coat pockets, hair blown across his forehead. "Didn't think you'd come," he said. "I never did learn to stay away from unfinished business," I said. We walked down to the lake, where the skyline looked like a memory, trying to forgive itself. The wind carried the smell of rain and coffee, and something like peace. He broke the silence first. "We hit every mark, Dad. Audits clean, pensions restored. The second chance funds in its second round. Even the whistleblower got reinstated under federal protection. We passed your damn test." "I know," I said. "Nora sent the reports." He turned to face me. "Then why haven't you said anything? You promised." "I promised I'd hand it over when I believed you were ready," I said. "Not when the paperwork said so." He frowned. "And what's the difference? Paperwork proves what you've done," I said. "Readiness is about who you've become." He went quietly, watching the water. "And what do you see now?" I smiled a little. "A man who finally learned that power isn't the same as worth. And that integrity doesn't come from last names or titles. It comes from doing the right thing when nobody's watching." He looked down, jaw tight. "That's a lot coming from someone who took a fall for everyone else." "I took a fall," I said softly, "because I couldn't save the people I loved any other way. You've done it differently. You saved the company, and you didn't have to lose yourself doing it. That's the point, son. That's the finish line." We stood there a long time, the lake wind whistling around us. Finally, I pulled an envelope from my coat, the transfer papers already signed. "This is yours," I said, handing it to him. "Heartline's yours. All of it." He didn't take it right away. "You sure?" "Yeah," I said. "Every generation gets one chance to rewrite the family story. This one's yours. Don't waste it." He looked at the envelope, then at me. His voice was rough when he said, "You know, Mom would have liked seeing this. Maybe she already does." He smiled just a little and slipped the envelope into his coat. When I flew back to Seattle that night, the rain was waiting, steady and familiar. I set my suitcase by the door, poured a drink, and sat by the window. A text buzzed through. "Aaron, we finalized the transfer. The board voted unanimously. I'll keep the compass intact. And Dad, thank you for everything." Then another message. "Consider the final milestone complete." I stared at the screen, the words blurring a little. Then I smiled, not the kind that comes from pride, but from relief. Out the window, Rain slid down the glass like thin silver threads stitching old wounds closed. I whispered, "Well done, kid," and closed my eyes. The sound of the rain was the same as it had always been, steady, honest, asking nothing of me but to listen. 12 years ago, it was the sound of exile. Now it was the sound of grace. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't winning back what you lost. It's watching someone you love finally become who they were meant to be and knowing you helped them get there. I lifted my glass toward the window, toward Chicago, toward all the ghosts who'd finally learned to rest. Here's to second chances, to rain that never stops falling, and to men over 50 who learn that standing tall again isn't about pride, it's about dignity.